Good morning, everyone. The music has stopped, so I take it that it's time to start. My name is Chen Yi. I'm an associate professor at the National Institute of Education and deputy head of research in the English language and academic group. Welcome to this webinar, and thank you for taking your Saturday morning to join us. For those of you who have been following the news, and I think most of you being educators would have, I think this is really an opportune time to be talking about award-winning teachers. As you know, Singapore topped the PISA results and has been on top of the ranks. And just today, the Director General of Education wrote an opinion in the papers talking about the many teachers who make it possible for our students to excel. So today, Jason, Dennis, and Kieran will be talking about award-winning teachers. But I'd like to recognize that also there are many teachers who have not been awarded in that way, but we do have many, many good teachers. But, you know, we really do want to learn from these award-winning teachers. And we also recognize that teachers work within the system and with the system to make things work. I think I mentioned just now, Jason, Dennis, and Kieran will be speaking. They themselves are award-winning teachers at the National Institute of Education, having been nominated for awards for excellence in teaching at NIE. Some of you may be familiar with them, having been through their classes, whether as a postgraduate diploma student, a BA student, or master's or PhD student. So, you know, I shouldn't be tooting the ELL horn, but maybe I should. You know, we do have many award-winning teachers at ELL, and 3 of them will be presenting to you today. And finally, I'd like to thank Prof. Amy Sui from the Faculty of Education, U Hong Kong and National Taiwan University, and our very own IC Lee, Prof. IC Lee from NIE. They are well-known experts in the fields, I would say giants in their own field of content and in teacher education. I would like to thank them for their time to respond and to really help us discuss and bring the conversation to another level. And finally, thank you to Robbie, Jason, and Lynette for organizing this webinar. Willie for supporting, as well as Sheila Head ELL. They're both here with us today. Thank you for supporting the event. So now I'm going to hand over to Robbie, and this is where the real stuff begins. Have a good webinar.
Thanks very much, Chin Yi, for that very warm welcome to the webinar. And thanks everyone for turning up bright and early. It's bright and early, 10 a.m. here in Singapore. It might be a different time for you in another part of the world, but so happy to have you. As Chin Yi mentioned, we have a very exciting lineup for today. First, I'm very honored to introduce my colleagues from NIE, and they'll be talking about their study of award-winning teachers. They will tell us about the teachers' very strong student-oriented mindsets, their teaching philosophies and belief in their practice, and finally, how they were so skillful in partnering with curriculum materials to really make the learning come alive for each and every one of their students. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. She is Dr. Kieran Kaur. Kieran is a teacher educator at NIE. She's also the program leader of the postgraduate diploma in education for the primary cohort. And her teaching and research interests are very much related to literacy, pedagogy, DI, differentiated instruction, and assessment of and for young learners. So without further ado, Kieran, over to you, please. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Robbie. Good morning to one and all. It's so nice to see some familiar names here today. So thank you for joining us for a presentation on award-winning teachers and their practices. So let me start the presentation proper. Let's talk about the why first. So why did we embark on this study? We embarked on this research project actually based on the gaps in existing literature, as we aptly mentions here that a research agenda with an explicit focus on teaching expertise is long overdue for second language teaching profession as a whole. Now, you may be interested to know what the outline is like for today. So I'm going to give you a background on the award types and the participants. And then we'll talk about these themes. So I'll start with student-oriented mindset. Then my colleague, Dr. Dennis Yeo, will talk about strong teaching philosophy. And my other colleague, Dr. Jason Low, will talk about partnering with curriculum materials. Okay, so what are the award-winning teachers that we kind of looked at in our study? The respondents in our study had either won the ITEA, as shown here, or the PET award. So maybe you can just quickly skim and scan the words in red here. This kind of describes what the award is about. Okay, so this is for the ITEA. Or they actually attained the PET award. Okay, and also please just skim and scan the words in red. So the participants in our study were 6 primary and secondary school teachers from Singapore. And there were 4 primary school teachers. We'll just call them teacher A, B, C, and D. And there were 2 secondary school teachers, teacher E and F. So as mentioned earlier, they had either attained the ITEA or the President Award. So they were winners of these awards. Okay, so for my theme, my presentation will focus on the theme of student-oriented mindset. And for this, when I talk about this theme, it will be in the context of teacher enactment and delivery of the lesson. Okay, so teacher enactment and delivery, and these were the sub-themes that surfaced. Okay, so let me kind of define what student-oriented mindset, what we took student-oriented mindset to mean. So in our study, student-oriented mindset will be seen as teachers delivering their language instruction. Remember the focus on enactment and delivery, yeah? Their language instruction with critical consideration of their students who are the subject of their enactment practices. And so reflective thinking and practice is a key part of this process as teachers think about their teaching and the best delivery, taking into account the students being taught. Okay, so you would have seen these 3 themes, sub-themes earlier. So these were the sub-themes that kind of surface for student-oriented mindset. Good pedagogical content knowledge, students being at the core of instruction, reflective thinking and practice. Okay, let me start this diagrammatic representation kind of focuses on the 3 sub-themes. I'm going to start with pedagogical content knowledge here. And this one was immediately observable. Let's call pedagogical content knowledge PCK for short. Okay, so this was immediately obvious from the interviews, the lesson observations. All the award-winning teachers in the study had very good PCK. They were successfully integrating what they taught based on what they knew of their teaching and their learners. So those who are not so familiar with PCK, what is PCK? PCK is a conception by Schulman, and it essentially involves how teachers integrate their subject matter knowledge, what teachers know about what they teach, to their pedagogical knowledge, what teachers know about teaching. Okay, so Schulman highlights that this also involves knowledge and conceptions teachers have of their learners and the different learner types. Hence, PCK is a form of knowledge that makes language teachers good teachers rather than linguistic experts or language specialists, as it involves knowledge of how language instruction should be organized for learning purposes, rather than a focus on the quantity or quality of knowledge for a given subject. All the teachers in this study, as mentioned earlier, had very good PCK. Language strategies and skills were taught and elicited explicitly from the students, and these varied depending on the students' learning needs and grade levels, with more explicit instruction at the lower grade levels, for example, for teachers A to D, and less explicit instruction at the higher grade levels, as was the case for teachers E and F. This finding is similar to the studies cited here, which looked at the role of effective teachers and found that expert teachers actually displayed an awareness of varying their instructions and skills, strategies based on the teachers of based on their learners across various grade levels. Moreover, all the lessons observed were appropriately instructionally dense, and this varied accordingly based on the learner type and grade levels of instruction across all the expert teachers in our study. Instructional density is used to describe the amount of classroom time devoted to academic activities and pedagogy, and this has been found to be a feature that effective or expert teachers, literacy teachers possess. Besides having good PCK, the teachers in our study also considered, so I'm going to talk about students being at the core of instruction next. And if you look, this is the next sub-theme. And the teachers in this study basically also had very good knowledge. Okay, so for this team, we looked at whether when they are doing lesson delivery and enactment, they place students at the core of instruction. Whether there was emphasis on that. So the teachers in the study that were dealing with the less proficient. Okay, wait, sorry. Okay, yes, sorry, my slides ran. Okay, so the teachers in the study that were dealing with less proficient learners kind of also ensured that the learners had appropriate scaffolding and support when we talk about students at the core of instruction. Okay, so they ensured that the learners receive additional scaffolding and support in their lessons. They carefully enacted lessons taking into consideration what the students could or could not do, balancing teaching based on what they deemed to be the best approach to instruction and based on their learners' proficiency. So, for example, taking on the students at the core of instruction, one example from teacher D would be one quote given here is that the teacher D kind of said, "Oh, my class is very scaffolded because some of them may not know how to write, but they can be involved in the idea generation. So I kind of scaffold slowly." Also, as part of placing students at the core of instruction, assessment and feedback, as well as feedback that kind of feeds forward, was a feature of these teachers' classrooms. Good questioning to gauge student understanding, to get students to think and respond, also featured in all the teachers' language instruction. So, and assessment and feedback has been found to be a critical ingredient in the repertoire of expert teachers. The articulation of all the teachers in the study revealed their firm beliefs in the role of assessment and feedback. I've just given one quote here. For example, teacher B kind of said, "It's very important to be good in assessing the progress of the students. So you'll be able to know how to close the gaps and bring the best out of each of them, leveraging on their strengths." So all the teachers had very good knowledge of this assessment and feedback. Okay. Okay, sorry. As part of having students at the core of instruction, all the teachers in the study were also found to place emphasis on wanting to make learning meaningful for their students through contextualization. In these teachers' articulations, alongside the lessons that we observe, language learning was often applied to authentic and real-life context for their students. So this was something unique that we found. For example, you can see teacher E's quote here. All the teachers had them. I'm just including one here. So teacher E, for example, said to foreground the need to view language as something that helps you access the world. We need to teach language in the context of where students encounter them to help them get a better handle of the world around them. So this was a nice feature that we found in our study. They wanted to make learning contextualized for their learners. And the teachers in the study were also concerned about building student confidence, being motivational and creating a positive learning environment. They were very respectful towards their students and the way learning should be done, regardless of whether the students were high, mid, low, or mixed ability learners. They also believed in empowering their students in self-regulated learning. And as such, there were very high engagement levels in their classroom. It was very heartwarming to see this. And then this is one quote from Teacher C. So she says, so I think the important aspect would be the belief that every child can learn, motivate them, give them opportunities to try on their own, celebrate success with them, connect to their heart, instill in them the confidence that they can do it. They may not know the grammar rules. They may not know the vocabulary. They may not know how to spell. It's okay. Just recognize the little effort that they've made, encourage them to try, because over time, this will spur them to move forward. Okay. Expert teachers were also found to be, research indicates that these are traits expert teachers possess. And Swiss study, for example, found this to be the case. There were high engagement levels in expert teachers' classroom, mainly attributed to them being very respectful of their students and the learning process, and so the students were highly engaged. Other studies cited here similarly found that teachers go to extra or great lengths at motivation and student empowerment. And this was a feature that expert and award-winning teachers kind of possessed. The final sub-theme, I'm sorry, a bit of lag, so I end up clicking, double-clicking, and then the slides run. Okay, so yes. So let's talk about reflective practice. This is the last sub-theme. So all the teachers in the study displayed the desire to apply to whatever insight that they gained from their reflections, whatever they learned, they had this desire, came across very strongly in our study, towards trying to make their lessons better or make themselves grow in the process towards their individual growth. So there was constant reflection of their lesson delivery, as well as a reframing of their conceptions of teaching, learning, and of themselves as learners. So I've included one quote here. For example, Teacher C mentioned, sometimes when I walk away from my class, I say, I could have done this better, you know, or maybe I could have do this better the next time. I'll make sure I'll rectify it or modify this and rectify that, or something to that effect. I think being a reflective practitioner is important. I'm still learning and reflecting on my lessons, and then this feeds into the next lesson. Learning and growth is very important to keep abreast with theories and research or teaching approaches, not afraid to learn, always wanting to improve. Sui too found this to be a critical difference between novice and expert teachers. Their capacity, which is their capacity to engage in conscious deliberation and reflection. All the teachers in the study were likewise reflective of their teaching and learning processes. So I've come to the last slide here. And research thus far has documented a range of characteristics that expert teachers seem to possess: Bourne, Mohan, Presley, Sui. And from the theme of student-oriented mindset that we are presenting on today, an observation we made was not so much that these award-winning teachers kind of possess these individual characteristics in the sub-themes that I presented on here, but rather how the interesting thing about the lesson observation and the data interviews and the lesson observation data was that these teachers would seamlessly interweave these articulations into their teaching and pedagogy and lesson delivery, and it just all interweaves kind of seamlessly. This concept of interrelatedness has been suggested by other researchers. However, these were more so from the perspective of literacy instruction in terms of the connectedness of, for example, reading and writing instruction in the classroom, or more so from the perspective of expert teachers having capabilities to integrate various aspects of knowledge to their teaching act. We would like to add to current research by proposing the concept of connectedness in the literacy enactment or delivery practices of these award-winning teachers, and how these sub-teams kind of not so much are individual characteristics that teachers possess, but they would actually interweave seamlessly in the expert teachers' enactment processes. And of course, further research may be needed on this area. Now, I hand the time over back to Robbie. I'm so sorry. There were some slides. The Wi-Fi was slow, so I was double clicking and then the slides read. Robbie, all yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kiran, for that very comprehensive presentation. And, you know, you really brought across to us your study of how the teachers were very reflective. They integrated, right, their knowledge of content with teaching and with a very strong knowledge of learners. And I think this leads very nicely into the next part of the presentation, where Dennis is going to share with us more about the teaching philosophies, how these were shaped, and what were the guiding principles. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. He is Dr. Dennis Yeo. And Dennis also teaches at NIE, and his research interests are very wide-ranging. They include film studies, popular culture, literature, pedagogy, and Gothic literature as well. He's taught across the spectrum of education, from the primary, secondary, to the junior college, and now at the University Institute of Higher Learning level, in a teaching career that has spanned over 3 decades. Very, very, very pleased to have you with us. Dennis, over to you, please.
Thanks, Robbie. Thanks, everybody, for joining us this holiday season, especially on a Saturday morning. When Jason invited me to be part of this research, I asked myself a very simple question. What would you want to study? I mean, if you have a chance to go into the classrooms of these award-winning teachers, what would be the interesting thing that you would want to learn? And what we realize is that although you can actually find out what teachers are doing within the classroom, I was really interested in asking myself, what guides them? What drives them? And I was interested in checking out what their teaching philosophy is. Now, we're going to find out what this teaching philosophy means as I go along. So a lot of research practices look at what goes on in the classroom, because that's really observable. The other possibility is looking at teacher personality. What kind of MBTI perhaps makes an award-winning teacher? But the problem, of course, is that personality is not replicable. I cannot be another person in the classroom. And as a result of that, what I was really interested in is finding out what kind of teacher philosophies these award-winning teachers possessed, what is the mindset that they had, and how this shapes their pedagogical practice, impacts their student outcomes, and influences the overall learning experience of their students. So what exactly is teaching philosophy? Well, in 1998, there was a very simple definition of this. It is a description of how teachers think learning occurs, how they think they can intervene in this process, what chief goals they have for students, and what actions they take to implement their intentions. But by the time 2010 came along, we realized that it isn't just a mere statement of what teachers do within the classroom or what teachers believe they do in the classroom. It's a lot more complex than that, because a teaching philosophy includes a set of beliefs, the bodies of knowledge that we possess, the perspectives, the positions, the principles, attitudes, and values that we hold towards education, the role of teachers within the classroom, and fundamental elements of education like pedagogy, curriculum, and assessment. Now, it's interesting as I go about doing this that as teachers, we ask ourselves, what is our teaching philosophy? What kind of mindset do we bring into the classroom? But let us complicate this a little bit more, because teaching philosophy encompasses a lot more. It balances both theory and practice, but it is also shaped by the life experiences that we ourselves have had, the social cultural environment, our own personal ideology and ethics. And the issue is how we align our personality, our values to a much broader idea of what education does. This may include the ethics of the school that we're teaching in, the particular subject that we teach, the wider national policies that MOE informs us about, and what is also important are the kind of societal roles and expectations that are expected of us as a teacher. So how do we locate ourselves? How do we situate ourselves within this educational landscape? Now, each of us has a different teaching philosophy, and I think that's what makes things interesting. This teaching philosophy is personal, it's varied, and as we grow as teachers, the teaching philosophy may evolve over time. So this teaching philosophy guides us. Why? Because education landscape changes, our student profile changes, and this helps us stay true to who we are as people and who we are as teachers and what we value and certain guidelines that we prioritize as educators. So what kind of philosophies did these award-winning teachers have? I just want to look at three things. The first thing is a belief that content must be made relevant to our students' lives. This is brought across through real-life experiences, cut across different general knowledge domains, and a discussion of real-world issues. So Crook suggests that this is the question of why and to what end a teacher thinks language is also being taught. Why do we teach language? Now, what runs across all the teachers is the idea that the teachers wanted to imbue joy, passion, and love for teaching. But in doing so, they felt that they needed to resist what Teacher E called assessment preparation cycles. The basic idea that it is really meaningless if they just pass their examinations, but they end up not loving language, and as a result of that, I will end up losing the whole child, quote Teacher A. So they make their classrooms relevant, authentic, and meaningful. Now, I find that these three words are really important for us as teachers, right? By making the lessons relevant, authentic, and meaningful, they feel that they make their students more informed, more empathetic, and what is more important, they empower their students. They believe, for example, that language deepens conversations, makes them more confident in terms of their own voice, and helps them in terms of their inquiry. Now, because they want to make this more meaningful for our students, they are also looking more in terms of the process rather than the product. Instead of just looking at the answers, they're looking at how students think and get to their answers, wanting their students to want to learn instead of being forced to learn. And more importantly, they see language as a life skill that at the end of the day, it is important for students to be able to use this in their real life. They go as far as saying that perhaps examinations and grades are incompatible with real life applications. And examinations and grades become a killjoy to learning because of a disjoint between what we teach in schools and between the rest of the world. Secondly, a belief in student capability and potential. At the heart of all their academic decisions was the student. They recognized the importance of student buy-in and prioritize student involvement and participation. Now, this is slightly different from what Kiran was talking about just now, because when Kiran was talking about this, she was talking about the idea of teachers considering students as learners. But this involves the entire classroom. The basic idea of the learning environment being student-centered. So each of us as teachers, we pick on certain learning theories and certain instructional methods that kind of align with the kind of person that we are. But what these award-winning teachers did was that they picked instructional methods that were really ones that gave up teacher power and empowered the students instead, okay? By making the teacher a mentor, a facilitator, or a guide rather than the source of all knowledge. This student-first attitude optimizes the diverse needs, interests, backgrounds, strengths, and individuality of their students. And as a result of that, their classroom environment became more inclusive and positive. Now, one of the things that they emphasized in their interviews was the idea that we ought to try to address the social emotional needs of our students first. Learn more about them, reach out to to the learners, validate their feelings. And one of them even said that our students sometimes are not engaged because they bring along with them baggage from their own personal lives that interrupt their learning process. Just like adults, right? We have our own baggage. Students have their own baggage as well. Now, one other thing that we also realized is the idea that they didn't just take MOE material wholesale. They believed in adapting these teaching resources to the student profiles. The curriculum acted as a core reference, but the objective of teaching was not just to learn the content, because content changes. So one of them gives the analogy that perhaps this is just you've got different ingredients, but we can cook different things, right? We can eventually come up with different dishes using the same ingredients that is provided. Now, one other way in which this is student-centered is the idea that the teachers looked at it as education as something to prepare students to be ready in the future. So they were not just interested in language, they were interested in imbuing the students the idea of inquiry, metacognition, the idea of ownership, independent learning, and a growth mindset within the students. The idea that at the end of the day, if the teacher is taken out of the equation, can the student fend for himself? So this isn't just a mindset, it must play itself within the classroom. So in their classroom, students were seen to be learners and leaders within the classroom. And this, of course, contributes to their academic success. Students were seen to be able to contribute productively and significantly to their lessons, not only as passive learners, but as co-designers of their learning process. This is because students were made to feel safe, so they were able to speak up. There was this idea of collaboration, and they celebrated all the successes that the students had. They had an idea of what learning looks like and what is the success criteria of learning. And one of the teachers even go so far as saying that the students are like mini teachers, making them co-owners, activating them as learning resources for their peers, and so on. So besides curriculum and pedagogy, this also affects assessment. Because if you think about the way we think about assessment, one of the things that award-winning teachers looked at was the idea that this isn't just about grades. Performance outcomes are not evaluated through grades. There are many, many skills that I test. And what they were really interested in was asking questions like, are the students showing that they even care about this subject? Did they give up? Did they continue? Did they persevere? Did they examine the question deeply? Did they use a level of continuum to help them, or did they reflect on their process? So they were really more interested in the learning process of the students rather than just the ultimate final result. Lastly, they were very interested in the idea of a student, not just as a student within the classroom, but the potential of a student as an adult in the growing world. And they believed that each student needed a champion. Each student needed somebody to believe in them, not to give up on them. And this fundamental belief in holistic education and human potential ran throughout all of the teachers, okay? Believing that our best lesson can be taught in the present, but they can only be embraced and understood in the future. Thirdly, a belief in their teacher identity. Now, this is different from teacher personality, because teacher identity is about who we think we are as teachers, or who we believe we are like within the classroom. So by identifying areas of the curriculum that overlap and align with our own personal values and goals, teachers then can find a sense of purpose and fulfillment that doesn't infringe on our core beliefs. So the question that is being asked is, what do teachers bring into the classroom? What do you bring into the classroom? And one of the things that the award-winning teachers do is that they bring their own expertise, their own experiences, their own personal interests. So teacher B was perhaps interested in drama, teacher E was interested in creative writing, and those were the specialties that they brought into the classroom and they taught their students, okay? Now, as Kiran has also mentioned, there was a great emphasis on reflection and the idea of continuous and ongoing professional development. And I think this itself is an indicator of their teaching philosophy. They are wanting to constantly improve and hone their craft as teachers. But it's not just about thinking about your own philosophies. It's the idea of being able to, having the courage to implement and try pedagogical experiments, and having an open classroom in which colleagues can come and take a look at what you're doing. So this includes creative practices, risk-taking, real-world learning, cross-disciplinary teaching approaches, the idea that effective teachers are creative teachers who are willing to try new approaches, okay? They then also saw language teaching not just about language, but as a cultural, moral, social, and political practice in which they could imbue life values, character within the classroom through language. And also the idea that the teachers themselves were learners. So let's just end with thinking about 3 questions. The first question being, do I believe that students want to learn? How can I relate what I'm teaching to the world? And how can I involve my students more in my classroom? Now, secondly, the question, of course, is rather than thinking about educational philosophy, which kind of sounds like airy-fairy thing, right? Ask yourself, what are the goals of education that I identify with? What are the things that motivate me as a teacher? What inspires my passion in the classroom? And perhaps that might give you an inkling to what your own personal teaching philosophy might be like. Now, last but not least, the question of how do I continue to hone my craft through reflective and creative practice? How do I experiment within my classroom? Am I creative? Am I trying new things within the classroom? And how does that affect my pedagogy? So, in conclusion, we begin to understand that teaching philosophy dictates the thought processes of a teacher in a moment-to-moment situation when we make decisions or when we solve problems within the classroom. So if we are more conscious of our philosophy, we are more aware of our rationale of why we teach the way that we do. And this also helps us to connect with colleagues who share the same kind of teaching philosophy as us. And as a result of that, we can exchange teaching strategies and therefore make the learning experience for our students a lot more meaningful. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Dennis, for giving us a window, right, into the teachers' beliefs and practices, illuminating their guiding principles, what helps their moment-by-moment decision-making in the classroom, and what shapes their practices. And you know, it leads very nicely into our third presenter's presentation, where he's going to share with us how the teachers really and very skillfully customize the curriculum to situate it in authentic scenarios, to make it very relevant for each and every learner in their classroom. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce the third speaker. He is Dr. Jason Low. Jason is a senior lecturer and teacher educator at NIE. He's a keen interest in studying teachers and their teaching, and his experience in the primary and secondary school context. His research interests include narrative inquiry, curriculum implementation and evaluation, the use of curriculum materials, and of course, teacher development. I'm very pleased to have you with us. Jason, over to you, please.
Right, thank you, Robbie. Thanks for the introduction. Now, I started this research study with a question. Are these award-winning teachers different from the rest of us, from the rest of the teachers? Or did they get the award because they had a beautiful paper nomination that the principal wrote a glowing report for them? So I really wanted to know what is the essence of the award-winning teachers. So when we went into this study, the four of us, Dennis, Kiran, myself, and our research assistant, we're all parents. So when we went into this study and we observed the teachers, boy, were we blown away. They are truly different. They are really a cut above many teachers that we have seen. And we as parents really wanted them to be our children's teachers. We wish our children had them as our teachers because they were so skillful, they were so passionate, they were so powerful as teachers. And with that, let's begin. Okay. What are curriculum materials? Well, curriculum materials defined very broadly is anything that allows us to support our students' learning and to support our teaching as teachers. Now, in two previous studies which I did, we had 2+9 schools and 2 schools. By and large, many teachers adopted what we will call, what Remla calls the good teacher doctrine, meaning the teacher is the solo performer. The teacher teaches because of himself or herself without a need for resources. Resources are dispensable, they're not so important. Remla, a researcher on curriculum materials, has shown that actually curriculum materials allow us embed within it a high-level map of the content, of the skills. James Hebert shared similarly that curriculum materials embed within itself the wisdom of the profession, because who created these curriculum materials? It's the teachers, the expert teachers, the experienced teachers. They came together to create these curriculum materials. So with it, it comes with their thought, their experience itself. So there is value in these curriculum materials. So how about these award-winning teachers? Do they adopt a good teacher doctrine, or do they partner with the curriculum materials? I'll let the teachers speak themselves. Have a look at this quote. Teacher A is from primary school. So this is her view of Stella. Stella is the national language education program in Singapore for the primary sector. This is her view. She feels that there's a stronger reading-writing connection in this particular program itself. And she will read through the guidelines to ensure she has a good understanding of learning outcomes, and she'll use these ideas in the Stella guidelines as references for her own teaching, for her own planning. But then she gives a caveat. She can't take it wholesale because she's teaching humans. Humans are alive, so hence she needs to make some changes. And this is what she says. If she finds the pitching of the guidelines too high, then she'll make the necessary adjustments with discussion with her colleagues. And then if she finds that her children cannot get it, she'll provide scaffolding. She'll make adaptations by adding on to it. And she likes the flexibility given to her in this particular program. She sees it very exciting because not only does she have ideas, she can mix and match. She can add on, she can take away. She has the flexibility, autonomy to make changes. And this is supported by the program itself. And this is from the perspective from the program director. There is flexibility exercised to allow for adaptations to meet the local needs of the schools. And the framework is designed such that it allows adaptation of the curriculum. In a recent paper which we did, it's a program evaluation of the program itself, we find that adaptations are necessary, and our award-winning teachers make the necessary adaptations. And the adaptations are aligned to the goals of the syllabus and to the program itself. Oh dear. And in a study by Sui in 2009, she stated, expert teachers are able to exercise autonomy. And this is what we found in our research study. The expert teachers have that autonomy and they utilize that autonomy skillfully. They respond to these contextual variations in terms of student learning needs. Now, teacher B, again, she also stated she appreciates the good resources that the Stella program provides, and the guidelines are her main reference as well. She also highlights the fact that it is a never one-size-fits-all lesson. So hence it's dependent on the students that we have. And so she will make the adjustments necessary for the students themselves. She needs to see how these students are able to learn and look at whether they are able to understand. And so they make the necessary adjustments accordingly. She likens the Stella guideline to the Dummy's book, which we are quite familiar with. She finds it is a good foundation. It allows her to have a good idea, and it allows her to have more ideas in how she can enact the curriculum for the children. And teacher C is the most experienced of all the 6 teachers, 30 years of teaching experience itself. And this is what she views of Stella. She finds it is valuable, it guides us in our teaching, and it also allows us to experiment. So a teacher with 30 years of experience can say that, hey, this program allows me to experiment as well. Gives me good ideas, but allows me that flexibility to experiment, to make an adjustment itself. Yeah. She makes adaptations likewise for her students because she needs to know where her learners are. And hence, as a teacher, she needs to provide that additional support. And that's where I come in. She stated it. The teacher comes in to make that adjustment, to make that adaptation for the students. through games, through technology. And she highlights the fact that, hey, she is putting in place Stella already. Her place is to help the students learn even more, learn even better with the materials that she's given. And she highlighted something which possibly the other teachers didn't mention, is that Stella, the program, provides them with the same language with which to discuss adapting the program as they're enacting the curriculum. And teacher D, as the same thing, looks through the guide with an eye to the students' needs, the students' learning needs itself. If the students are not able to meet the objective, she'll think of additional educational experience to help them. With emphasis is on the learning needs, using the curriculum materials to meet the learning needs of her students. This study also showed that expert teachers have great improvisational skills. They're able to adapt really well because they have a repertoire of routines to help them to make the adjustment, the necessary adjustments to meet the students' needs. Now, teacher E is from secondary school. He's the youngest among the 6 teachers, 10 years of teaching experience. So his view of the curriculum materials given by the ministry, Voices at Play, which was implemented a few years ago, just a few years ago. This is what he likes about Voices at Play. It enables them, it is relevant to reality, to life outside school. And also finds that it is has greater emphasis on metacognition because he feels it is important for students to know, to think about thinking. He feels that the Voices at Play allows them to streamline, to make it more efficient in the use of curriculum materials to help the students learn. It makes the preparation easier, so for them to target what needs to be learned. He as well makes adaptations because they feel that if you follow everything, they wouldn't have the time. What he likes best is about the comprehension questions. They're not just about exam type of questions, but questions that help the students understand the text itself. So he feels that the text, the curriculum materials, VAP, has helped him and guided him to break down the text, to provoke thinking instead of preparing for examination questions, which essentially is what the syllabus wants, to get the students to be able to think critically, think out of the box. That is the whole idea for the ELS, English Language Syllabus of Singapore. Again, the Swiss study has shown expert teachers are able to transcend these constraints, these barriers, and perceive and exploit the opportunities, and which is what the award-winning teachers have done. And teacher F views that it is a good balance. The Voices at Play is a good balance between what is given and what they have. So they're using the VAP to extend the choices of text in their teaching in the school curriculum itself. He also feels that the curriculum materials allows them that level of autonomy. And hence they can make the adjustments, the adaptations based on the students' learning needs, which he confesses, it varies from school to school, which we, as teachers, we all know. No 2 students are completely alike. No 2 classes are completely alike. No 2 schools are completely alike. So hence, we need to make that adjustment, make the adaptations. But as they make the adaptations, it's always kept. We always have an eye to the objectives of the curriculum. The quote I shared earlier, this was an evaluation of the Stella program. Adaptations are necessary. And the integrity of the curriculum materials, integrity of the program is tied to the goals of the English language syllabus, and which all award-winning teachers have articulated. They make the changes with an eye to the objectives. Remillard has shown that when we are using curriculum materials, teachers will utilize their experiences, their expertise, their pedagogical skills to make the necessary adaptations to help their learners. And it is the teachers that bring these curriculum materials to life. But instead of discarding them, our award-winning teachers optimize the use of these curriculum materials because they found value. It's valuable references, valuable ideas. And then a study shown by Taylor about 10 years ago showed that adaptation is actually the most difficult of all. Using curriculum materials as is, complete fidelity, or completely throwing away the curriculum materials is a lot easier because adaptation requires us to see what is needful for the students, how we can make changes so as to help our students learn. So we need to have a good idea of the students' learning needs. We also have to have a good idea of what the essence of the curriculum materials are, hence to make the necessary adaptations itself. In a sense, in a way, the curriculum materials provided by the Stellar program by the Values at Play, it provides that equality of quality for all students. This is what the ministry possibly is hoping to do. Equality of quality, the basic level of quality for all students, regardless of where they are, regardless of the schools, regardless of the classes, regardless of the teachers. Because we all know teachers teach differently. Some are very good teachers, some possibly not so good. But these set of curriculum materials ensure that it's an equal level of quality for all students. But these award-winning teachers do their optimizing of the curriculum materials, provide equity. They make the necessary adaptations to help their students learn what is needed. In that sense, these studies show that it is the capability to see and exploit situated possibilities. This study shows that it is the capability to see and exploit the curriculum materials in relation to the specific context, to help us see they are experts. And in ending, Li and Yan shared, effect is found to play an important role. And this is what we found in our study. All the 6 award-winning teachers displayed great passion for their craft. And truly, they taught from their heart. And with that, I thank you.
Thanks very much, Jason, for sharing with us how the teachers thought about the curriculum and how they partnered with it, as you've so eloquently put across. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, we've heard from the 3 presenters what they have found from their study of award-winning teachers, their thoughtful practice, their very strong knowledge of teaching and learning, of learners, and very importantly, of themselves, right? How through the skillful way in which they articulated their beliefs, the way in which they were going to enact that to make it meaningful for all their learners. And now I think it's really a pleasure for us to have our 2 discussants with us to share with us their thoughts and insights on award-winning teachers and on teaching and learning. The 2 discussants today are Professor Amy Sui and Professor IC. So let me introduce the first discussant, Professor Amy Sui of the University of Hong Kong and the National Taiwan Normal University. Amy is a Yushan Fellow and she's Chair Professor at National Taiwan Normal University and Emeritus Professor of Language and Education in the Faculty of Education at the University of Hong Kong. She was Pro-Vice Chancellor and Vice President in HK University 2007 to 2014, during which she led the reform of undergraduate education. She's published extensively and most of us have read her work and are very inspired by her work. And she works and she looks at classroom discourse, conversational analysis, language policy, and very importantly, and very close to our hearts, teacher development. Amy, it's a pleasure to have you. Over to you, please.
I'm so sorry, Amy. I think you're muted.
Hi, everybody. It's really a great pleasure to be here, and I'm very honored to have the opportunity to listen to the findings of your research. And I can see that on a Saturday morning, we've got 60 participants, and I was just expecting, like 10 participants or 15 participants, but it's really great. And I know we've got a participant from Turkey. He got up at 5 a.m. in the morning to join this webinar. So you see um, how interested people are in your research. Instead of making another presentation, I've only got 3 slides, okay? But I don't want to go into my slides yet. I'd like to, if I may, engage in a discussion with with 3 wonderful presenters. The work that you've presented is very, very rich, and in a way, I must say, I'm not surprised, because Singapore teachers are well known worldwide for their dedication um, to the teaching profession, and it's been studied a lot. I wonder if I could start off with a few questions, and I guess it's not just my esteemed colleagues presenters who presented their work, and I suppose other colleagues are very welcome to join. I have the first question is, why do you study award-winning teachers? Do you mind sharing your views? Why did you embark on this kind of study?
Well, like I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, I was wondering if it's really because they are really different, or is it because it's a paper exercise, an excellent glowing report written by the principals for them? So we wanted to find out if they really are that great, and the research studies showed that they are really that great. Yeah, that's my primary impetus for this study. Kiran, Dennis?
Yeah, just to add on,
Say,
also
Karen.
because there was a gap in current research and there was a need to explore this, so it came together very nicely. What makes them different? And then research says this was not an area that was, to add on to what Jason said, so research says that this was not an area that was being investigated.
I think for myself, there are many great teachers out there. I think the awards can only recognize a few. So what we were interested to find out was why these teachers were distinguished. Was there something that we could learn from them in terms of their practices that we could bring into our own classrooms? And whether, to some degree, as Jason had mentioned, whether this was just something that was more of a marketing ploy rather than just the idea that this was actually a recognition of teachers who are really practiced and an expert in their craft, and what we could actually learn from them. Yep.
Yeah. That's very.
Maybe
That's
just
very
to add in
interesting.
as a listener, Amy.
Yes.
Penny, we lost you. Could you repeat your question?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, just to add in as a listener, I thought that so much of what was shared was actually very useful for us as teacher educators in terms of what to focus on in our teaching as well, that was just my thought.
Sure. Yes. That's very important. I don't know if other participants want to share their views on this too. Okay, so if with that, perhaps could I have start with my first slide, the first point of my first slide. So I want to start off that my reaction to this very, very rich presentation is to start off with WH questions in expertise studies. So the first question is, why do you study these experts? Okay, so we talk about is it just paper, or what does it look like in their classroom, and so forth. And what one of the participants said, and I didn't get your name, I'm sorry, what's highly relevant. And she was saying, well, I'm very interested because I want to learn from these teachers. So basically what we are saying here is that, can I have the first point? Okay, what do we study? How do that? Those are the two questions. Then the first bullet point under why is setting standards of excellence, setting standards of professional excellence. And basically, this is what underlines the study of expertise on the whole, whether it's teaching, whether it's performance, whether it's as doctors and what have you, yeah? It's setting standards. And for professionals, it's setting standards of professional excellence. So we have these award-winning teachers. And when I was the vice president of Hong Kong U, I actually set up the Teaching Excellence Award. And I set it up at university level, and I set it up at what we call Outstanding Teaching Award, and then Outstanding University Teaching Award. Those are two different levels. In other words, what we are trying to do is we want to set standards. And we want to say to the teachers, hey, look, for our profession, this is what a successful teacher looks like, yeah? And this is highly worthwhile. And I would also say that in different contexts, the standards are different because you take into consideration contextual variation, okay, which I will talk a little bit about. But I would like to suggest that there is another very important reason why we study expert teachers. And can I have the second bullet point, please? It's understanding how experts learn. And I think for teacher educators, that is absolutely crucial. In other words, what we are saying, how do they get to where they are? Okay. Because some of the teachers might say, well, you know, these expert teachers, they're way, way up there. You know, there's no way I could be like them. But I think as teacher educators, if we could map out, how does this teacher get from a novice teacher to a competent teacher to an expert teacher? What is their journey? And when we've got that captured, what we could then do is we short circuit it. They don't have to go through 10 years. Maybe they go through 6 years, and they could avoid all these pitfalls and what have you. And I think that this is perhaps an aspect that I do hope that I will hear more about, you know, from your study as well, you know, that you can then talk about how do these award-winning teachers get to where they are. Okay. The second question that we must ask is, what do we study? And this morning I've heard a lot from the three presenters of what they actually studied. You studied their philosophy, you studied how how they deal with curriculum, materials. and how they integrate their pedagogical knowledge and subject matter knowledge. So if I could have the second bullet point, is that what you're doing here, what we've heard this morning, is what are the characteristics of successful teaching, okay? And you've outlined a number of them. What I have not heard this morning, perhaps, or perhaps there's not enough time, is the second bullet point. What conditions of learning and what kinds of learning experience are conducive to the development of expertise, or are conducive to the development of successful teaching? I think that's very important. Yeah. Under what condition do these teachers develop? And I think actually there is some mention of that this morning too. Teachers learn well when they're in a supportive environment. If learners learn well in scaffolded environment, so do teachers. Yeah. But there is also other conditions of learning. For example, in my own study of the expert teachers, what you find is that when teachers are given a different task, things that they have never dealt with, they try to grapple with it, that's when the whole repertoire of skills get widened and they move forward. And so there's a lot to be said about assigning teachers to different responsibilities over time. Yeah. And I think this is an area that I'm sure if you have done that already, I would very much like to listen to them and learn from you. The last question, how do we conduct expertise studies? And that's what where I want to spend most of the time on in the rest of the time. But I'm very conscious of the time, Robbie. I should only talk for 10 minutes. Am I right?
Yes, Amy, you can. We have about another 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes to go. So very welcome to use that time.
Okay, this is highly important. How do we conduct those studies? So the question I wanted to put to the presenters is to say, how did you go about collecting your data? How did you identify these characteristics? Okay, but we don't have time to go into that. So let me move on to the next slide. Here, what I'm talking about is methodological issues. First of all, is the expert-novice comparison. How do we know that these teachers these are the characteristics of successful teaching if we do not compare it with novice teachers? How do we know that this is not something that teachers learn just very quickly, even novice teachers can do? So the whole point about expert-novice comparison is really to say, to distinguish between the two. And here I want to point out a misconception between expert-novice comparisons, that very often this kind of a comparison was criticized for dichotomizing novice and experts. And I think this is a misinterpretation or misconception. It's not about either you're an expert or you're not. It's not about that at all. It's a methodological approach. That is, if you want to teach students what is red, and if you keep showing them a red mug, a red book, and a red box, and you say this is red, the students find it very difficult to understand what is red. Maybe red means a box. Maybe red means a cup. But if you show them red and green, a cup which is red, a cup which is green, and you say, this is red and this is green. Then they capture the meaning of red right away. So this kind of contrast actually is underpinned by the theory of variation. You cannot teach difference by showing them something which is the same. Okay, so it's by contrasting novice and expert that you can highlight the characteristics of expertise, and I think that's very important. Then the second one is can I have the second point, please? Is the expert versus experienced non-expert. That's very important too, because it's when you compare, there are certain skills that you pick up over time, but those are non-experts. That's where you can identify what the characteristics of expertise. So here, could I have the next PowerPoint? Here, what we are saying when we start, if we look at the literature of expertise studies, they started off studying masters chess players, okay? People who can play lightning chess, or the virtuoso performers, like virtuoso ballerinas, okay? Those are looking at experts, as taking an absolute approach, which I will talk a bit about later, where these are people who they are at the height of their performance, and it's very, very difficult to become like these virtuosos. But when we start doing novice and expert comparisons, and we look at expert and experienced non-experts, we are talking about expertise as a continuous process. That is, there is a developmental process, and that it is you keep working at the edge of your competence. And the minute you stop working at the edge of your competence, you stop being an expert. Okay, so expertise is a continuous process. Can I have the next point, please? The third methodologically is comparing expert versus experts. This is something which has not been done very much, but there is, as my paper talked about, that is Weinberg compare two expert historians, and look at one as historian is very familiar with Abraham Lincoln, and another historian who doesn't know anything about Abraham Lincoln, and they were asked to deal with the same piece of text. It's this kind of comparison which led Weinberg to notice that, in fact, the whole claim about experts having highly organized domain knowledge versus experts who do not have that domain knowledge, as distinguishing between the two, what he found was that, in fact, the expert without this highly organized domain knowledge was able to grapple with this highly complex text about Abraham Lincoln, because there is a dialectical relationship between his expert skills and the text. The text actually was able to inform him about history, and he was able to deal with it. And he came to the conclusion in the next bullet point, please, is that, in fact, it's not the application of highly organized knowledge domain to the task, but rather is a dialectical interaction between highly organized knowledge domain and the task completion. That is my third bullet point, please. there is this dialectical interaction between knowledge base and task completion. In other words, let me just very briefly capture this, that methodologically, there is a lot to be said for this kind of comparison. Expert novice, expert and versus experienced non-expert, and expert versus expert. Okay, coming to my last slide. What I'm raising this as something maybe for all of us to think about, and that is what you focus on, what is the focus of your research, and the approach that you adopt has a very important impact on your conception, on our conception of expertise. Okay, so for example, when I mentioned that the research focus in the 60s was on the virtuoso performer, and when the focus shifted to expert professionals, we see that there is a shift from an absolute approach to a relative approach. A relative approach is what I talked about, the comparative approach, okay, the comparison. And the conception of expertise moved from routine expertise versus adaptive expertise. And that is what we see, what we understand as real experts are people who are adaptive, rather than people who have mastered a whole host of routines and they can just perform effortlessly. Could we move on? Okay. Then the research focus, much more recent research focus, have shifted from professionals working in a particular professional context to professionals working across professional contexts. And the approach then is, instead of looking at individual professionals, we look at professionals interacting with participants. And the conception of expertise moved from vertical expertise, which relates to individual, to horizontal expertise. That is the need for experts to work across, to be drawing on the expertise of people you work with. And it's also referred to as relational expertise. Then finally, it's the research focus on teaching expertise in a particular cultural context to teaching expertise in different cultural contexts. So the research approach then that is adopted is successful teaching in one cultural context versus in a different cultural context. And the conception of expertise in teaching shifted from the dichotomy of teacher-centered teaching and learner-centered teaching. And I'm drawing on the work of Stiegler, which you're all aware of, where teacher-centered teaching, quote unquote, which was frowned upon, was actually, they came to the conclusion that there is a lot to be said about teacher-centered teaching, which in fact is very learner-centered. I don't have time to go into that, but what I talked about in this last slide, it's actually in the foreword that I have written up to introduce Ellen Havella and Diane Belcher's forthcoming book in 2024, I think. And in fact, IC has got a concluding chapter in that book as well. But I'm sorry I've taken up too much time. This is very, very dense, but this is what I have elaborated on in my foreword. Thank you.
Thanks very much, IC, for that very, very important, insightful guide for us as we think about researching expertise, right? the dimensions of expertise, the continuum of expertise that teachers are on, and very importantly, shedding light on teachers' learning as they become experts, as they hone their expertise. And I think it's really a lot for us to think about and to guide us in our future research as well. It follows very nicely that we have our next speaker, IC, to add her insights on the topic as well. Let me introduce IC. Professor IC Lee is also at NIE, and her research interests are in second language writing and second language teacher education. She is former co-editor of the Journal of Second Language Writing, and she's currently the principal associate editor of the Asia Pacific Education Researcher and co-editor of the International Journal of Christianity and English Language Teaching. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce IC. IC, over to you, please. IC, I think you're muted. Not yet, IC. Still muted.
Yeah, the mouse is not sensitive enough. Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you very much.
Once, twice, and it didn't work. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to first echo Amy. It's a great honor to me to be invited as a discussant here. And I'm very grateful because I'm so new to NIE, but I'm invited by my colleagues to respond to the 3 fantastic presentations this morning on award-winning teachers. Now, I really appreciate Amy's response, very enlightening and inspiring. And I hope to pick up some of the points she mentioned in my response. Now, to begin with, oh, don't know why it's not working. Sorry. Okay. Yes. Okay, this is my cover sheet. Yeah. Okay, sorry about the hiccups. 3 themes were mentioned by my colleagues, and they are a student-oriented mindset, a strong teaching philosophy, and skillful partnering with curriculum materials. So when I was preparing for this part of my response, several existing frameworks regarding teacher excellence or teacher competence and teacher professional development came to mind. The first is Jack Richard's 10 components of teaching competence and performance. Is an article he published in the RELC Journal in 2010, and he outlined 10 components, which are very rich. And when I was listening to the presentations of my colleagues, I noticed that actually most of the components surfaced in the presentations. Notably, number 6, learner-focused teaching, which corresponds to Kieran's focus on a strong student-oriented mindset. And I think Dennis underlined the importance of a strong teaching philosophy, and also made explicit reference to a robust teacher identity, reflective practice. And these are things mentioned by Jack Richards, like theorizing from practice. And Jason focused on curriculum materials. And I'm sure when expert teachers use materials skillfully and adapt them to cater for diverse student needs, they draw on different aspects of expertise, such as content knowledge, contextual knowledge of the curriculum, knowledge of the educational context, knowledge of the students, as well as teaching skills and pedagogical reasoning skills. Okay. So although it seems that there are only 3 main attributes, obviously more than that, right? Actually, all these expert teachers display other aspects of expertise, such as those mentioned by Jack Richards. I think the 2 components which may not be explicitly manifested from what I saw from the slides this morning, maybe language proficiency and joining a community of practice. But I may be wrong, right? Okay, another framework that comes to mind right away is the Accomplished Teacher Development Framework by Schumann and Schumann, 2004. When they talk about the traits of accomplished teachers, they mention 5 simple characteristics: ready, possessing vision. And I think Dennis used the term teaching philosophy. To me, it's more or less like not only the beliefs, values, but also the vision, the professional vision, and having motivation, willingness, right? and knowing and being able to do, all right, it's like, I think both Kieran and Jason referred to teachers' knowledge of students, how they adapt the materials and so on. And of course, reflective practice. And as I said earlier, maybe being communal may not be directly observable in these award-winning teachers, or maybe it's not your focus. I think one key takeaway for me from the 3 presentations is that although these 3 themes, they were presented separately, they are for sure interconnected. And I think teaching philosophy to me is the cornerstone, really. It's a foundational element because it has a direct impact on how teachers interact with students, how they foster student-centered pedagogy, and how they tailor the curriculum materials to suit individual student needs. So incidentally, Amy mentioned the WH questions 3. And here I draw on the language teachers golden circle proposed by Donnie and Over in 2014. In the golden circle, they include 3 simple WH questions: what, how, why. And just now I said that I feel that the teaching philosophy, the why of teaching, should be the cornerstone, the foundational element, and it should be at the heart of language teaching. And according to Donnie and Over, also, I think, born out in my own experience as a teacher educator, a lot of novice teachers and student teachers, pre-service teachers, they tend to prioritize the what and how questions. I mean, when I visit my student teachers during teaching practicum, they're very much concerned with, oh, what am I going to teach? What are the learning objectives? What techniques am I going to use? What activities am I going to implement? So they are very much preoccupied with the what and how questions, but somehow they may lose sight of the most important and most fundamental question of why. Why do I do what I do? Okay, so very often teachers may just work backwards based on the what and how to sort of justify their actions and decision making. But in fact, Donnie and Over remind us that the why question is the most important question. Okay, so just like the why of teaching expertise. And actually, the why question, I think Dennis referred to the teaching philosophy. He mentioned beliefs, values, and according to Donnie and Over, there are 3 V's. And as far as the why is concerned: values, vision, and vocation. And I think one important implication for me as a teacher educator, as mentioned by Chin earlier, I think is what I can learn from this project. And if why is the most fundamental question our teachers need to ask, then what can teacher educators do to foster a strong professional vision, to help teachers understand why they do what they do, to let them recognize their own values and vision. And more importantly, teaching is a vocation. They're not just paid to teach. They're not just paid to mark student writing. They're not just paid to do this and that for their students, but they have passion and they're called to be a teacher. So I feel that as a teacher educator, I'm always thinking about how I can foster this sort of passion and enthusiasm among my students and among my teachers. And in fact, the importance of the why question, as I review the literature, has been underlined by quite a few researchers, especially those who are interested in expert teaching. Actually, I'm sorry. I think this one, you cannot see the entire slide, right? I don't know what I should do because I cannot see.
Amy, we can see your 2 bullet points starting with in the discussion on notion of expertise and
Yeah. Okay, can you see my slide actually? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. The why question, Hanato and Inagaki, when in the discussion of teaching expertise, they maintain that understanding the why question is really the first step to constructing conceptual knowledge. So that shows that the why question is really essential. And similarly, in my own study about expert writing teachers with Yuan, expert writing teachers, they also ask the why question. Why do we do what we do? Why do we, for example, select this topic for writing. Why do we respond to student writing in the way we do, right? So the why question is so important. Now, another key point I got from the three presentations is the idea of adaptation mentioned by Dennis and Jason. I would like to talk about adaptive expertise, and which was also mentioned by Amy, adaptability. Expertise is not just a product, it's a process, right? Amy said this, it's a continuous process, and the focus is on how expert teachers learn to become experts. The teacher learning process is very important. As teacher educators, is crucial for us to try to understand how our students or student teachers become experts. So adaptive expertise is teachers' ability to identify instructional roadblocks. There are some problems, some obstacles that come our way, and how we generate appropriate responses to navigate the challenges and to deal with the obstacles. So this is a very important aspect of adaptive expertise. And highlighting his recent work also on writing teacher expertise, L2 writing instruction expertise, he underlined the importance of adaptability. And similarly, in my previous study with Yuan, we also found that flexibility and adaptability are so crucial to expert teaching and expert teachers. And this is particularly true, I think, in turbulent times, in times of flux and transformation. And I like to quote from Amy, Choi 209, it's very important for teachers to constantly engage, right, with experimentation, to innovate their practice, to problematize the unproblematic, and to look for new challenges. So we don't just look at expert teachers as ideals. Oh, they are loving, they are passionate, they give clear explanations, they are like perfect, they are like saints. No, they have problems, they have obstacles, they have challenges, and they problematize the unproblematic. They also seek new challenges and in their teaching. Okay, so I think moving forward, Amy has provided us with a roadmap, which is really great. Some remaining questions to explore. I mean, if my colleagues are still interested in this topic. Now, while award-winning teachers are often referred to as outstanding, exceptional teachers, or even exemplary teachers, my question is, do they necessarily possess all the key attributes of expert teachers? I mean, award-winning, we assume that award-winning teachers are expert teachers. But if we examine the notion of expertise thoroughly, what attributes make up this big notion called teaching expertise? And what other attributes of teaching expertise may award-winning teachers possess? For example, what about collaborative expertise? What about emotional expertise? I remember in Kieran's presentation, she walked us through the criteria for the President's Award for Teaching. And there's a point about teachers' ability to inspire not only students, but also peers through actions and words. And I think also, Amy also mentioned not just vertical expertise, but horizontal expertise and relational expertise. So I think it would be very interesting to investigate how award-winning teachers, expert teachers collaborate with others, how they share knowledge and come to a better understanding of themselves, their students, and their roles as teachers, how they distribute expertise as well. And what about emotional expertise? And I think, as Dennis mentioned, teaching philosophy is less easily observable in the classroom, and so is emotional expertise. So as far as emotional expertise is concerned, I think this is really very important, especially like we went through the COVID-19 pandemic. So resilience, emotional intelligence, all these things matter so much. So how do expert teachers model emotional intelligence in the classroom? How do they understand and monitor and manage their own emotions? And how do they foster positive emotions in their students, and maybe in the peers and colleagues as well, to foster strong relationships. I think this is a very important and interesting area for further research as well. And finally, given the importance of the why question, the professional vision, the teaching philosophy, I think is also very useful for research to focus on this why question, and especially how the professional vision may intertwine with other important aspects of expertise, such as those two aspects I've mentioned, collaborative expertise and emotional expertise. So I think Amy has given us a wonderful direction for future research, and I hope that if my colleagues are interested in continuing with the research on award-winning teachers or expert teachers, they may want to explore some new avenues and share new findings with us in the near future. Yeah, thank you. That's all from me. Yeah.